Hi guys, I'm Shmee, and today you join me at Lamborghini Edinburgh to take a look at this. Behind me, the new Lamborghini Huracan Performante. Now this is the special track-focused version of Lambo's baby V10 supercar, and I only say baby because technically in the lineup you have the Aventador with its V12, then the Huracan, but this thing, the Performante version, one of these, has set the lap record at the Nurburgring Nordschleife with a time of 6 minutes and 52 seconds, 5 seconds quicker even than the Porsche 918 Spider. So this has some very serious intent. Now today we're going to take a look around it, go for a walk around, talk about the modifications that went into upgrading the regular Huracan to the Performante to make that possible, and then go for a first drive to see what it's like out on the roads. So let's get started, take a little look around it, and it's a big thanks to Lamborghini Edinburgh here who have invited me today to come and take this car out for a drive and show it to you guys as well. So let's get started, taking a little walk around. You can see that there's some fairly heavy sort of redesign to the aerodynamics, the styling around the front. There's a rather large wing at the back there. But coming around to the rear, of course, it's four-wheel drive. But back here, you have the naturally aspirated 5.2 litre V10. In this car, 640 horsepower with 600 Newton meters of torque. That's up from 610 horsepower and 560 in the LP610, the regular version of the Huracan. So you're looking at 30 horsepower more, 40 Newton meters of torque more, 0 to 100 kilometers an hour or 62 miles an hour. And this, you're going to be able to do in 2.9 seconds. 0 to 200 kilometers an hour or 124 miles per hour is down a full second to 8.9. Top speed over 200 miles an hour, 201 plus. So it's a very quick, very fast, very capable machine. Now, one particular sort of trick feature, if we come around and talk about the aerodynamics, because aero is one thing that's changed, the engine has changed, the gearbox has changed, the suspension has changed, and I'm going to go through it all, but I'm going to start with what I think is the most exciting, which is this ALA, Aerodynamica Lamborghini Attiva, or Active Aerodynamics to you and I, and in particular, both at the front and the rear, you have these flaps. So this panel back here actually opens to direct air down beneath the car, either on the left side or the right side of the car, as you're driving of course, to give it more downforce and grip through cornering. So if you picture the scene, the car is sort of turning round to the right, it will fire air down and out under the left side to propel it forwards and give it some extra push. And if we come round to the rear, the way that works back here is through these sort of ducts at the rear of the engine bay. Air comes in, partly it's sort of redirected down towards the exhaust for cooling, but the other side of the airflow comes up through the stem here for the rear wing, this sort of forged carbon rear wing that I'm going to talk about again in a second. The airflow comes up through the top, and on the underside here you have all of these sort of slats that you can see, and again the air is pushed out here to give it more downforce and to give it a little bit more turn around the corner. So this active aerodynamics system is clearly quite trick, and that has helped propel it to that Nurburgring lap time. Now if we come round, the car is actually 40 kilograms lighter than the regular Huracan, and that's done mostly through the use of this forged carbon composite, which is quite a raw sort of carbon look, and they've refined that and put the gloss finish on it, which gives it quite a nice effect, completely different to regular carbon fibre, but has helped shave a sort of substantial amount of weight, which when you combine with the performance increases makes it even more crazy. And you can see, just looking around at the general design, it's quite open up here around the rear wheel arch, so a lot of stones will be fired out there. Don't follow one of these closely, but good for allowing the sort of air that congests around there to release and reduce the swelling. As we come around to the exhaust system, you can see the two fairly giant exhaust pipes on the back here, close to the engine for immediate exit, get the air directly out of there, and that's a lighter system. It makes a killer sound that we're going to hear in a moment as well. Coming around, you've got these sort of slightly larger scoops, you've got new wheels on the car, ceramic brakes naturally. I'm going to come around to the other side though and open it up and show you the inside too. So we've got the Lamborghini key here, give it an unlock. Even for weight saving, by the way, on the regular car, if you unlocked it, this would have popped open with a motor, but they took out the motors to save weight. So we open up the door, where it is very, very stripped out. Everything is Alcantara, the forged carbon, but no carpets or sort of things like that that are taking up a little bit of weight. You've got the sport bucket seat, carbon bucket seat here, which has this quite cool laser etched pattern on it, which is a neat thing to do that with lasers in the Alcantara. Very stripped out, the full digital display that has some new screens and modes that we'll talk about shortly. Sport, Strada, Sport and Corsa driving modes. Again, a lot to talk about on that front. But if I just reach in and turn on the ignition, I can show you round to the engine bay, which you open up with that press button down there. So we come back to this, lift up the engine cover. Oh, you can see it's been raining today, so ignore that. Where you can see the bronze style engine, and quite interestingly, actually always in this sort of car sits slightly off center, but perfectly weight balanced even though. But they're supported underneath, well, surrounded by carbon fiber everywhere. This is raw carbon as well, if you can just about see that. But towards the back, you can see these ducts I was talking about, the way the air comes in from above and is channeled two ways, one down to cool the exhaust down through here, and the other to come in and up through the stalk of the wing, which hangs with this sort of swan neck style, which always looks super, super nice. But let's just shut that back down, give it a click. Optional glass window bay on this car. In fact, this car's finished in a very nice specification with the Giallo Inti paintwork, sort of pearlescent metallic yellow. Let's step into the car for a second here. You can see forged composites, the carbon used on the air vents and all around. You've got the Alcantara steering wheel with the flat bottom to it, and your driving modes here. But let's put it into Corsa for maximum noise, where you get that display. Flip open the switch, which is still done with this. You can actually press through, but there's something cool about folding this flap up to start it. Start button here. Let's roar into life. That sounds good. It is undeniably louder than the regular Huracan, quite significantly so, and it actually changes depending on your drive mode. So if I was down in Strada, after it's run its cold start sequence, it would get quieter, but that also changes the display modes that we'll have a look at in more detail later on. But that one, the Corsa mode, is really, really cool, but you can't access any other functionality when you're in that. That's when you're supposed to be focused on driving, and only driving. Now I can tell you already, this seat, well, the one I'm sat in, is very firm, but it looks super cool with this design. There we go. It's got a little bit quieter. Wow. That is a barky car. There we go, quieter. You can hear that opening up. Okay, so that's a quick little introduction to this fairly crazy machine. I think it would be right now to take it out for a little drive, see what this is like out on the road, see what a car that can be the fastest production series vehicle, normal sort of series vehicle around the Nurburgring Nordschleife is like on the road. It won't necessarily be a race, but it will be fun. Let's go and see. Now the first thing that you notice driving in the Performante is how normal it is. Just like a Huracan, the gearbox is super smooth and seamless in the way it shifts. There's a tranquility to the drive. The exhaust noise isn't infiltrating the cabin. Now this is driving in Strada, the regular street mode, Strada literally being the Italian word for street. But we're driving along, and even as I go into the 30-mile-an-hour limit here, it will take 7th gear at 30 miles per hour. And the ride is not overly firm. The suspension was tightened slightly, the springs are 10% stiffer, but it's only 10% because it was designed for the Nürburgring lap time, and at the Nürburgring you don't want super aggressive sort of suspension setup because of all the undulations on the track. But we're in 6th gear at 26, 27 miles per hour at the moment, and it's just effortless in the way it goes about it. Very much a Volkswagen and Audi group product. You're looking around, the view out of the mirrors is fine. At the back actually is completely fine because the rear wing is so high that you look out underneath it. It doesn't obscure your visibility at all. Now I am going to say one thing that I really, really dislike about this car, and that is the seats. They are so firm. It's too much so, and even the regular seats in the Huracan are too firm, but these buckets are just solid. So the ride is compliant, but the seats are too aggressive the other way, which overall kind of upsets that balance in my book. And the Aventador SV ones are even worse from what I remember driving it, but this is pretty solid. However, we get out into a national speed limit, so we can start accelerating away just gradually. I'm still in Strada mode, so full sort of traction on, going over some pretty bad bumps there, and it rides them completely fine, like it's no big deal, and that's very much in character with the original Huracan. Now, if we start sort of turning it up, if we go into sport mode, so sport is all about fun. Sport is where you get the most crackles. ESC goes into sport, so it'll be slightly sort of willing to slip if the situation arose, but it's dry mostly now, and this is four-wheel drive, so that's not going to happen right now. However, I can press here, M, go manual, start blipping the paddles, start getting some of that sort of crackle, and if I accelerate a little bit and lift off, you get the sort of crackles that follow afterwards. The shift is so fast, the moment you pull the paddle, which is a lovely thing, it just drops straight into gear. Then you put your foot down, and the power delivery is lovely. The V10 feel, the naturally aspirated feel, and the noise you get is just a delight, and that's in sport mode. We can turn it up one more and go into Corsa, and you know what I'm going to do to enjoy Corsa to get us started? Let's come to a standstill for a moment, put ESC off. This is literally how you do launch control. Put your foot on the accelerator, or foot on the brake first, then the accelerator, and then you go. Build the revs, and thrust mode. Oh, and my sunglasses are going off the back of my head. And wow, that gets moving so quickly. Okay, so it's undeniably very, very fast. And now we find ourselves in Corsa mode, the most aggressive, and you can feel that on the suspension. It's quite a lot firmer now. But the noise it makes, listen to that. There's just a cacophony of noise going on behind. And then you get the beats and sort of the crackles, and it's a silly, silly sound. It's louder than the regular Huracan, that's for sure. And just, you put your foot down, and the way it picks up pace is magnificent. It is really, really, really quick. But Corsa is definitely on the firm end, probably a bit too much for the road. So let's put it back into sport, where the displays change as well. You get your navigation view back up. But this mode is set up, more crackles I can hear immediately. 4 being the most fun driving mode in a road environment. Yes, that's basically how they pitched it, and very much how it does it. And I think that's quite fun, because realistically these sort of Corsa race modes are getting way too fast to drive on the road. So having a nice sport mode where you don't necessarily need to shift at the red line at 8,500 RPM, you can enjoy it going a little bit slower, is quite a nice sort of thing. And one other thing here, I can enable by pressing and holding this button on the steering wheel. Yeah. You've got a live display of what the aero is actually doing, what that active aero is up to, and how much extra downforce it's giving you at the front and the rear with the flaps that are opening up and the various different things that are happening. So it's quite neat to be able to see that literally as it's happening. Give some crackles past the builders here, put my foot back down. So this is sport mode, and to me this is what it's about on the road. And the shifts, because they're so quick and easy and smooth, it makes you want to do way more than you need to do, just to get the cracks, get the noise up towards the top of the rev counter. I mean, just listen to this, just listen to that noise, and it auto shifts up when you get to the top. But it's a savage, savage sound. It's ferocious. The car feels dramatic, and almost, it might be cliche to say it, but this is sort of what the Huracan should have been from new kind of thing. It's, when it came out, it was sort of considered a little bit, I guess, not exciting enough by many people, and I think this has introduced a bit of character, although I still feel like there's room for more. I still feel like some things perhaps could be even more dramatic out of it. So Lamborghini's dynamic steering varies depending on the mode you're in, and in sports actually there's the turning ratio is sort of lowered slightly. But now I do have somebody in front of me. Let's go for a little overtake here. Obviously ample power to do that without question. So to turn the indicators off, misbehaving on me. But the steering feels better. It's still the electronic steering, and to me it feels a little bit, you know, you don't have that same front end turn it that some other cars have. It feels a little bit like that. It could be better. Could be slightly better. The thing that's amazing me though is how much power it has. The 640 horsepower, but it feels like 700. It feels like more. The way it just got moving when I put my foot down, my mind is still sort of calculating and taking that in. I've pulled over because I want you to hear a little bit more of this. So just the sound. Let's just concentrate on this V10 for a second. And this is in Strada, so technically the quiet mode. But if I come into the car here and use the control on the steering wheel to switch between the modes, even from here you can tell how much louder that just got. So Strada, Corsa. So that is noisy mode, but let's jump in and let's hear how this sounds with a couple of quick blips now that the car is substantially warmer. Now if I move it back into sport, the revs drop slightly, which is why it gets quieter, but we'll get more crackles. I think you get my point then. It's pretty ridiculous, that engine noise, but let's actually now head back to the dealer. Back in the countryside, that means let's draw out the revs to the red line. What a sound! It's just silly, it's a Lamborghini, that's what it's supposed to be. Noisy, in your face, flamboyant, and a little bit ridiculous, and it does that perfectly. Now one thing I just can't quite work out in my mind is whether it really is that fast. Now I know the Nurburgring lap was done using Pirelli's Trofeo R tyres, which are not a standard option on this car. It comes on P0 or P0 Corsa, Corsa being the regular kind of road tyre but not quite semi-slick, so still appropriate for track but road legal without being dangerous in wet conditions, let's say. I mean, it's still a little bit slippy, but actually now that I'm back in town, let's get back into Strada mode again, and automatic, just super sort of quiet and chilled. So it's fast, but is it really that fast? I mean, it's very, very quick feeling, but I can't see how it's that much more than a Huracan. To me, it feels very similar to the regular Huracan, just with a little bit more noise and drama. The driving feel feels slightly refined, slightly stiffer, but not sort of crazy leaps and bounds different. It's still very familiar to that original car. So I need to test this in a more, I guess, dramatic environment than on a public road, let's say a racetrack, to properly experience it. But just as we come back to the countryside, it's so easy to switch driving modes, back into Corsa, back into doing that, dropping the gears, and then just putting your foot down and listening to the noise. You want to let it build up slowly, you want to shift more than you need to, just because it sounds so glorious. It really is. I mean, long live the naturally aspirated engine, and long live the V10, because it sings and wails with a symphony that is just glorious. And watching the sort of activity and what the car is doing is also pretty fun. Just to have that on that secondary display. Dropped it down to second, perhaps one more than I meant, but hey, it sounded awesome up at sort of 7,000-8,000 RPM, didn't it? And one of the fun things when you get to a sort of slower bit, click. I love that, just multiple downshifts, just to hear the noise it makes. It's incredible. So, things I love: sound, gearbox, the way it shifts, but I really, really do not like these seats. I'm sorry to go back to it, but I'm starting to feel it, and I've not been driving for that long. It is very, very firm. I'm going to press it back into automatic. It feels, I mean, it's all very familiar. If you're used to almost any VW Group product, you know, the screen setup is lovely, but it's very similar to what you have now, even in a TT, or do the A3s have it, the RS3s? This sort of, it's a brilliant system. I mean, it makes no surprise that it sort of trickles down through the whole sort of model range, but I feel like it's almost, going back I think to the first thing I said when I was driving the car, it's almost a bit too normal. It feels very, very normal. Not necessarily the event and occasion, not like an Aventador does, for example, an Aventador S or an Aventador SV. You jump in one of those and it just feels like something crazy. It feels like something from outer space, whereas this feels like something you can drive happily all the time, and even in the Performante you can jump in it and drive to the shops. Now, why am I saying that like almost like it's a complaint? Because it makes no sense for that to be a complaint, but I feel like it should have even more drama. I'm not sure how to properly explain that. So I think it's a great car, don't get me wrong, it's a wonderful car, and the fact that it was able to achieve what it did at the Nürburgring, to do a time like that, is just something mesmerising. It's a crazy, crazy thing, and full sort of hats off to Lamborghini for doing it and for coming away with that sort of, I guess, achievement, that title, that wonderful thing. It's the fastest car around the Nürburgring. But to me, I feel like I want it to be a little bit more. I'd love one, don't get me wrong, I'd love one, a Performante, but it's not everything. It's not absolutely everything. Anyway, I'm going to keep driving, keep enjoying, because it is putting a lot of smiles on my face, and head back towards Lamborghini Edinburgh and show you a little bit more around inside here and some of the other sort of bits and pieces about this car, because there is a lot more that I have not yet shown you. Anyway, on we go. And And we are back outside the dealership. And by the way, in case you were wondering why there is a new GT3 right there, it belongs to a customer who is a big Lamborghini man, and Lamborghini Edinburgh here is partnered with Ferrari, Maserati, Porsche and Bentley, so it's being worked on in the Lambo showroom at the moment. But let's have a proper look around the inside of here and all the displays, the screens, and this. Let's start with this, the big digital driver display right in front of you, which by the way is under a rather nice forged carbon sort of cover over the top. But you have a number of sort of controls here that you can change the different mode you're seeing. So let's start by basically, if you press and hold them, it alters the mode. So pressing and holding the top button changes between rev counter and speedometer. You can see that they swap around there. Pressing and holding the bottom button here goes full screen and brings up whichever other sort of driving mode or whatever you want to have displayed. And that's where literally using the controls in the center here, you can kind of go with anything. So you saw that it was taking us to the nearest fuel there, but you can have info, trip, navigation, and pull up the full map and take that back to full screen should you prefer, if you wish, like that, which is quite nice what you can sort of do with it. And then you've got sort of up and down, which let you scroll through sort of smaller bits of information as well, depending how you've got it set. And then the middle button changes actually what you see here. So depending on your driving mode, it will turn on or off the display of the ALA system. So back towards your temperatures there. Press and hold again, and you can change that back to that display. So it depends really how you want to have it. And then just to show you the different screens, that was Corsa, that's Sport, that's Strada. So Strada is blue, simple, standard, yellow, ESC into sport mode for sport, and then into Corsa you get that sort of horizontal view. Now here you have a few other bits of information as well. Obviously the temperature's there, but you've got the G-force sensor in the middle, your gear selector large, the rev counter all the way over the top, so it's as close as possible to being in your eye line, and other sorts of bits and pieces all around. But even sort of your speedometer becomes a little bit secondary when you're out on track, which is of course where that mode is set for. And when you're in that, you can't do anything. You can't do this stuff. MMI system not available. Please select Strada or Sport. So don't think you can go and set a navigation destination if you're driving in Corsa mode. So we'll pop it back into Sport just for the moment while we continue looking around. So in here you've got your sort of standard things, your windows, which Lamborghini windows, I always forget it's the wrong way. Yeah, so you press up to put it down, which never makes sense to put it down to put it back up. You've got your lift system, so front nose lifter, ESC, hazards, parking, auto start stop in the driver's window, your climate controls, then all your MMI, your multimedia interface, all that side of things. Then you've got the lovely fighter jet style start stop button right there. Coming further back, reverse is this nice sort of lever on top, which when you pull up and go into reverse, you get a full screen reversing camera, which is a nice little thing. Back into park for the moment. Manual or automatic gears, handbrake. Now they've stripped out the armrest, so to be lighter there is no sort of full piece armrest in here. Obviously that would be pointless weight, so that is removed. And then going further back, actually you've got an interface port there, 12-volt socket, then your SDs and your disc back there as well. So there's a small little parcel shelf behind here where you can look into the engine bay through and see that giant wing and the carbon obviously surrounding the seats, which interestingly, if I sort of point the camera over there, there's a massive amount of space. You can almost fit like a laptop bag or something between the seat and the side sill. We're sat inside a sort of mix of aluminium and carbon fibre tub inside this car. You can get a little bit of luggage in here. There's a 100-litre boot up front as well, so a little bit of stuff you can fit in there. But generally, for things that are sort of familiar from Huracans, you have triangular and hexagonal shapes everywhere you look, whether it's the sort of door pulls, whether it's the air vents, whether it's the trim piece that you've got through here in the middle, obviously even the finish on the seats and the finish down on the carpet there on the floor. There's not much else going on, just the sort of floor mats. Wherever it is you look, you have those shapes, sort of everything with slightly nice sort of jagged kind of edges. But I suspect it is sadly time for me to turn this off. What else can I show you quickly? Cruise control here, wipers, the light, the indicators here. Left is that way, right is that way, off is pressing it. Confusing. So if you want to turn right with your left hand, you press right. Very confusing. The lights, the flasher, which is neat. Kind of slides itself up, that's quite nice as well. But otherwise, all pretty self-explanatory. So let's sadly off for the moment. The screen actually goes full. Belt off, little Lamborghini logo there, and jump out. A
final look around the exterior then, and what else can I really talk about? Well, we've got 305 section rear tyres, 245 at the front. These are the Corsas. Like I mentioned earlier, you can also have the Trofeo R semi-slick should you wish for the track, like Lamborghini used for the Nurburgring testing, although it comes on the regular P0 or P0 Corsa. Around the back, looking at it, all of this sort of carbon work everywhere. It's all a little bit crazy. You can see quite a bit of the exhaust system actually through the sort of ducting and vents at the rear, and the gearbox sits just back there as well behind the engine. But it's all quite cool styling. It's just updated, a little bit more aggressive, and obviously much more focused than in the regular Huracan. And I really quite like the way the front is. It comes really far down. It's more sort of forwards, more aggressively forwards than before. And obviously with this lower carbon fiber piece, this car also has the styling pack, which gives you these gloss black parts, which would otherwise be sort of, I think, the satin black instead, but looking quite nice with the tricolore stripe. So that's sort of standard on the Performante to have the Italian flag down the sides. But I haven't actually talked about the name itself, Performante. So previously the Gallardo version or equivalent was called the Superleggera, super light. But for this one, Lamborghini were making the point that it's about performance, hence Performante, which was used for the convertible version of the Superleggera, but this time round it's the Performante throughout, whichever sort of model it is. And there are rumours that there might one day be a Spider, but at the moment it is the coupe that has stolen the headlines, and that is this car that we have here. So I think visually, parts I really like are the rear wing, the way it sits. It's very nicely integrated, the way it's sort of almost exactly in line with the roof of the car, where you have all these kind of shapes, again, triangular shapes sort of through the top of the car coming down towards the back. Exhaust sounds incredible, the engine sounds incredible, and the gearbox is brilliant. But I feel like there could be ever so slightly more. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up there. A big thanks goes to Lamborghini Edinburgh for having me along today to drive this car, take it out and see what it is all about. So I hope you've enjoyed this pretty detailed look at the car. Let me know your thoughts about it down in the comments below, and I will catch up with you again very soon. Cheers!